I chose this study because I grew up in sub-Saharan Africa, and mosquitoes are troublemakers. Has anyone here ever had to deal with mosquitoes? Or ever had malaria? No malaria? I have. Malaria is predominant in tropical countries due to the warm and humid nature of the region. It gives a conducive environment for the female Anopheles mosquito which actually carries the malaria parasite to thrive and complete its life cycle. Symptoms of malaria ranges from mild to severe. It comes with headaches, chills, fever, vomiting, diarrhea. If left untreated, it could be fatal, especially in young children. This study actually looked at the use and effectiveness of malaria preventive by employees of Chinese construction companies in Western Africa. Okay, so malaria is one of the most widespread infectious diseases worldwide, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. And despite intensified malaria control strategies, it still is very strong and prevalent in that region. According to the World Health Organization's malaria report, countries in West Africa account for 51% of malaria cases and death globally. The objective of the study was to investigate the effectiveness of malaria preventive measures that was implemented at public and individuals, their relation to malaria infection in infrastructure construction projects operated by Chinese companies in West Africa. Chinese workers in Africa face a high risk of malaria, and it was essential for them to actually evaluate the measures they had in place that were supposed to protect them. Why the Chinese migrate to West Africa? Chinese workers are in almost every industry in West Africa. They are in the manufacturing sector, the mining sector, and especially the construction sector. State-owned Chinese companies actually dominate the market share of infrastructure projects in Africa. And in recent years, many Chinese engineering companies and workers carry out these projects. They are in charge of the construction of roads, railways, airports, harbors, and ports. Why are the Chinese at risk? Chinese workers who find themselves in malaria endemic areas are actually at risk because of the insufficient knowledge of malaria risk and preventive measures. They are also exposed because of the lack of exposure. There hasn't been any local malaria cases in China for many years. In 2019, China reported 2,674 malaria cases, out of which, let's say almost all of them were imported cases from migrants who were coming back from West Africa. They actually imported the malaria cases from West Africa to China. Who is responsible for their safety? The companies they work for, the construction companies they work for. The management team actually put in place interventions that were aimed to reduce malaria risk, and they implemented estimated malaria prevention measures at the public level, just at the public level. Workers were also responsible for their own safety. They had to motivate themselves just to protect themselves from being infected with malaria. Management actually didn't come in to enforce or see to the adherence of the interventions they put in place. It was up to workers to just encourage themselves and motivate to use the resources provided by management to protect themselves. The methods used, it was a cross-sectional study, and it happened in West Africa. They looked at 7 different countries in West Africa. They looked at Nigeria, construction workers in Nigeria, Mali, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Senegal. These were the 7 countries out of the 17 countries in West Africa. Sample size, they had 256 participants who were mainly Chinese migrants, and the survey duration was from July to September 2021. The selection criteria. Workers had to be affiliated with specific companies that made on the world's largest 250 international contractors list. Chinese companies that made it on that list were 6, and they took workers from just 2 of them. Participants had to be Chinese. They must be able to read Chinese, must be currently working on a selected project, and they should have more than 1 year of work experience in West Africa. They should also have WeChat on their smartphones. WeChat is a popular Chinese messaging app that they used to conduct the study. The data collection phase, they used a 20-minute structured electronic questionnaire, which they administered online. They administered that through the WeChat app. That was the messaging app. That's because the countries they understudied were just scattered all over. So it was, I believe it was the most, it was the better way to do it. They also collected data between July and September 2021. The study adopted a cluster sampling strategy, and the companies they used were actually randomly selected. Response from the same IP address was rejected just to prevent data duplication. The preventive measures were in 2 folds. They looked at that of the public level, preventive measures at the public level, and preventive measures at the individual level. These were the variables they looked at: the distribution of treated mosquito nets, living in a dormitory with a bathroom, living in a single-person dormitory, living in a clean and sanitary living environment, vegetation effectively controlled, and the housing type. Preventive measures at the individual level was the use of treated mosquito nets, lighting mosquito coils, dressing appropriately, that was wearing long sleeve shirts, pants, just to prevent these insects from biting you, and not saving water indoors, spraying insecticides indoors, and cleaning vegetation. So these were some of the examples I decided to put in here for us to have a pictorial view of what the insecticide spray looked like. We use this back in Africa a lot. It's really popular. Then the mosquito net, sleeping in the treated mosquito net, lighting of mosquito coils. You light it up, you leave it in your room for some time for the smoke to do its job. Then you come in and take your rest. Then spraying the environment, fumigating the environment. So these are just some examples I decided to put in here for us to just have a pictorial view of what we are thinking about. So these were the results. Statistical analysis was performed to describe the characteristics of the participants. These were the categories they looked at. They looked at gender, age, marital status, educational level, jobs, that's the job titles of the construction workers, work experience in Africa, and how many times one had been infected with malaria within a year. So these were the corresponding percentages they had that went with the categories. And with table 2, they used a chi-square test to test for the correlation of malaria within a year with the individual and public preventive measures. They looked at the public level. These were the variables they looked at and the corresponding percentages. And they looked at that of the individual level, and these were the corresponding percentages they recorded. They also used multivariate ordinal logistic regression analysis to determine whether the relevant variables independent. And with the individual preventive measures, it was just 2 out of the 6 preventive measures they looked at that had a significant association with malaria infection, that of standardized use of mosquito nets every night and spraying insecticides indoors every day. Those were the only 2 out of the 6 that they observed that had an association with malaria infection. And with the public preventive measures, all of the variables they looked at didn't have an association with malaria prevention. It could be that the resources they provided were not used as they were supposed to be used, and maybe it wasn't reaching the target population that they were supposed to be. With the results, out of the 256 participants, 96 participants, that is 37.5%, contracted malaria more than once in a year. And there was no significant correlation between public preventive measures and malaria infection. The standardized use of mosquito nets and insecticide spray contributed significantly to fewer malaria infections at the individual level, and removing of vegetation around houses at the individual level was related to higher malaria infection, which was an unexpected finding because mosquitoes actually find their resting places around vegetation that surrounds homes, and removing such vegetations was supposed to have prevented malaria infection, but in the study, it was the other way around. We had a higher malaria infection. So to conclude, some of the individual preventive measures had a stronger association with malaria prevention than a variety of the public preventive measures. And there was a lack of association between public and individual measures, which suggests a more integrated approach to malaria control. The study also highlights the challenges of malaria prevention programs for migrants. They also made some recommendations. They suggested that there should be further investigation in a more larger and more diverse sample of migrant workers. And also malaria prevention also requires the expertise of specialized professionals. That is, and also attention from management. That is using professionals to design preventive programs or education for construction workers, and not leaving all the tasks to be performed by management. Protective measures like appropriate clothing, lighting of mosquito coils, and indoor water storage needs evaluation with improved compliance monitoring. These measures did not actually influence malaria infection in a positive way. Prevention and control of malaria should also include improving worker awareness, that is educating workers and motivating them enough to use the resources that has been provided by management to achieve an effective outcome. So the strengths of the study, it focused on expert rates. That was people who were non-immune, they were at high risk. And so looking at the study and trying to look at what actually protected them, I think it was a strength because it focused on a group that were non-immune. And also it assessed the effectiveness of accepted strategies. Some of the strategies they used in there are still currently being practiced in West Africa, but it hasn't been tested in this way. So doing it this way actually helped to understand whether these things were even working or not. So as it assessed the effectiveness of accepted strategies. I believe the sample size was also strong, and they also provided recommendations to the study. And with the weakness, it was not diverse. The study was only looking at Chinese participants, and also it looked at subsets of countries in West Africa. We have 17 countries in West Africa, and they just used 7 out of 17. So the findings from this study cannot be generalized, but it was just for these 7 countries. And the data collected was a questionnaire that was administered online, which means it was prone to recall bias. So that's all I have. Thank you. Any thoughts, questions, anything from you?
So you said that they recorded data within like July to September. Is that correct?
Yes.
And they had to work there for over a year.
Over a year to qualify. Yeah.
Did they take into account if they had passed before the September period occurred?
Anything like that. For you qualify to participate in the study, you should have worked in West Africa for a year or more.
Okay, but they didn't test them for, or they didn't say or ask them questions of if they had it.
No.
Okay.
Since they only looked at like 7 countries in West Africa rather than every single country, do those different countries have different like rates of malaria? Like, are there some regions where malaria is more prevalent?
I think so. I believe the countries in West Africa might report differently and people might have immunity. Yeah, so it might be different.
So correct me if I'm wrong, did they have any questions about compliance with the practices that they said were reported to prevent or help, eliminate or reduce malaria cases? Did they have anything about that? I didn't see anything in the invitation or in the article about that. So yeah,
Yeah, they stated in the article that management wasn't responsible for compliance or it was just up to the workers to just motivate themselves to use these preventive measures or not. Yeah.
Yeah, so this happens, this is a very descriptive study because they didn't really do an intervention. They just kind of asked the people listened to and did where they were told. And you mentioned it earlier, the motivation, training, etc. If you hand someone a tool, here's a net. Great. It'll go in the garbage. And they would have, if that's all you do, then why would they then do something with it? They don't understand why or to what degree it's necessary. And we don't know how much of that was going on there. So it's really hard to say that these are or are not effective because we don't have any indication of compliance, motivation, training, any of those other factors that could affect, whether or not they do anything with those tools. So, yeah. But I mean, to me, this feels more like here's where things stand based on what people said kind of study as opposed to use and effectiveness.
Along those lines, I was kind of surprised at how much they made of like the counterintuitive results on the vegetation clearing. Because my other thought there was like, we mentioned differences in baseline risk arising from where they were located, but they're also like they didn't ask about every potential safety practice that these employers could have. And so there could be just, one employer did camp-wide vegetation clearing, but they also were working in a high-risk area or something like that could have been very much possible. And so I'm surprised they dug in so much on that.
How did they remove the stuff, right?
Yeah.
Did they provide them with the gloves and the full, and covering and everything like that to do that process where all the mosquitoes like to hang out? Or did they just say, all right, let's rip all this stuff out because it's going to make it better? And then they all get bit and they all get malaria and they're all, anyway.
Start clearing out the camp's vegetation when malaria cases are up.
Yeah.
Like,
cases are up. Let's get all that stuff out of here now.
Anyway. Forgive me if somebody already raised this, but I don't think so. I had to step out for a bit. But I was struck by 60% plus were site administrators, and most of them had single person dormitories. So they are Chinese immigrant workers, but they're fairly privileged or higher ranking. And so I thought, oh, that's kind of striking, interesting about the sample. The sample had a high response rate. So most of the workers for the companies are higher ranking. non-laborers. And then I was also struck by there's still a big opportunity for improvement. So the mosquito nets were effective. But only half the people reported using it. So big opportunity for improvement. But these are site leaders who could potentially have a big impact if they knew the practices, followed the practices, role models practices. So anyway, more of comments than questions.
Yeah, pile on. I like that. My first question is, what is the real sample size? And because this only talks about 2 companies, so the sample size 2. That's my first question.
Yeah.
And the next layer down into that is this issue related to Ryan's comment, which is who's responding and what is the real participation rate?
Yeah.
And I can't make sense of this article, so I don't know if I might have missed something, but it says, somehow it says, this is on top of page 3. The above content was entered into the box and the total sample size obtained was 252. Okay. So I'm not exactly clear how 252 came up, but then the next one's the whopper. Considering the non-response rate of 20 to 30% for the online survey, the minimum sample size in the study is 330. What on earth?
So what is
I do not.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
It sounds like they're taking, it almost sounds like they're taking an expected non-response rate and just applying. It's like, disgusting. And then Ryan's point gets to the issue of the non-response rate being more like 90% non-response rate.
Yeah, because you're only getting managers and how many people are below them that
Unless
aren't.
the Chinese contracting companies are really there to manage. then
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
the laborers are all Africans or other immigrant folks.
And China is currently so oppressive. It's reminiscent of the, World War II era, in terms of the enemies list. And I mean, they just went after an economist who made a negative comment about the growth rates, I mean, and people disappearing make negative comments about the government. So I would be fearful of it as an employee. I would answer a questionnaire in China right now to save my life.
And to add to that, it says the data from the study are available at unreasonable request.
That's a copy and paste that they've seen all over the place.
But yeah, I mean, I have the same concerns about any coercion either way to participate or to, so.
And the next one will self-report, and the conditioning of, what the right answer is, especially in a coercive environment. It would be much better to have the objective, somebody else went out and figured out what people are doing.
It's how the World Health Organization lumped cases and fatalities together, but there's, no discussion of outcomes. Of course, dead people aren't going to respond to a survey, but any idea on China and fatalities from malaria?
No, it actually said there hasn't been any local cases in malaria for a long time. And cases that they report are actually imported cases that workers are bringing in from other regions.
Thank you.
Do you know why or maybe I missed it, there's no chemoprophylaxis used as a preventative measure?
Yeah.
Like any medications used to?
They actually stated medications that are supposed to be used 2 to 3 months just for that period. And these Chinese migrants stay beyond 2 to 3 years. So it doesn't really.
So they didn't use the medication because they were there for so long. Interesting.
When you're moving to West Africa, that is malaria endemic areas, you are supposed to have some sort of medication, which is supposed to be used for 2 to 3 months. But if you're staying more than that period.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? All right, wonderful.
Mostly supervisors and then hiring of labor people. You don't know enough to know if all the labor said no way.
It just seems like a bizarre choice. They're like, imagine there's a mixed language barrier if you're hiring managers.
I met a person to hire a migrant employment practices, which is mind-boggling. I mean,
Hello, thank you so much for being here. My name is Claudia. I'm an OIPRT student. So what I did, okay. So this Running to Well-being, a comparative study on the impact of exercise on the physical and mental health of law and psychology students. So this was published in the International Journal of Law and Psychiatry. This is a 2.7 impact factor journal. That's for in the law realm, that's really good. But if you look into the medicine realm, that's not so good. But well, it all depends which perspective you want to look into. What I did, I plugged all this thing into ChatGPT. I never get this face. Okay, I plugged it in, so I got this image, and I was able to get the law component, right, to your left-hand side, because they all look like lawyers. Well, and I have learned to interact with ChatGPT because I did not quite get the whole psychology component. So I said, explain the component of psychology students in the image you generated. And it said that the difference was in the attire they were wearing. So I said, okay, well, they look more relaxed. I get that. And also the things with the painting and the images that they resemble well-being. So, okay, it kind of makes a little bit of sense, right? So I got that covered. Now, why this article? This is the semester where we have to present our thesis. So I'm working on lawyers. I say, okay, I'm gonna go still working on that to get more literature review. That's why I chose this one. And there's also another thing. I'm trying to work my way into research. And one of the things that I would really like to do is to write a grant that would have to do with interventions. So we know that lawyers have a lot of problems with mental health. There was this struggle in 2016. We know that there's a crisis and the struggle with depression, anxiety, stress, burnout. But now we know we made the survey when they are lawyers, but before they're lawyers, they are students, and before they're students, they are part of the general public. So why don't we try and do some intervention before that? And we know that students, they have higher indices of stress, depression, and burnout than general population, right? And why is that? They say that especially law students, their workload goes better. So work with me counterclockwise. So to the top right, they have workload that's higher than other students. They also are more competitive environment than other students. They have more loneliness. Their environment, they're not help out each other as well as other students. And also the Socratic method, the way they're taught. They rely a lot on asking a lot of questions during their classes. And it also made me thought of some of our classes. Do you ever have classes where you get asked a lot of questions? But I know I have some classes that are like that. What do we know? What's out there in the literature? We know that there's an association between exercise and improved well-being, maybe the peripheral vasodilation and there are endorphins that get released. Maybe working out with someone makes you feel better. That could also work. Exercise can assist in stress, anxiety, depression. There's a positive correlation between exercise and mental health in university students. There have been some studies with first years, with nurses, with athletes and non-athletes. And there has also been studies on the negative association between law students and exercise with an R of -0.2. What is lacking out there? There was lacking the association between exercise and mental health in psychology students. That's why they did this study. So what they decided to do was an empirical comparative study. Their objective was to look into the correlations between exercise and psychological well-being in law students and compare the results between law and psychology students. They did this in Australia, but they did this at 2 different universities. So now we're starting to see a little bit of maybe biases or problems that we could find in here. This one's in 2015. What did they measure? Through online questionnaires, they measured emotional distress, physical distress, exercise, belongingness to university, and university appraisal. When did they do this? At the end of the semester. So I also got me to think, how was I doing at the end of my last semester? That could also introduce a little bit of maybe not problem, but things to take into consideration, right? How did they measure emotional distress? They did not use any validated scale for this, but they had used this one in other studies that they had made. What did they ask? How have you been feeling emotionally during the previous semester? They made with 6 items, 3 positive, 3 negative, and they were asked to answer in a ranked way. If they feel happy, worried, calm, sad, confident, or afraid, not at all, a little bit, quite a bit, or a lot. Higher scores may indicate greater emotional distress. So even though they did not use a validated scale, but they did try and measure their internal consistency with a Cronbach alpha of 0.84. That's really good. But what they did do, and this is good, they compared it to a DAS-21 scale. I had no idea what that was, but it is used, and it has a sensitivity and specificity for depression and anxiety of between 0.5 and 0.6. It's not that good. I know that PHQ-9 has a better, higher one, over 85% for depression. But DAS-21 does not have sensitivity and specificity, or it's a defined one for stress. So there's also something to start taking into consideration for our weaknesses and limitations for this study when we get to that part. Physical distress. We can see that it also has a rank like the other one. Not at all, a little bit, quite a bit, and also 6 items. What they did here, they also tried to test the internal consistency for this item, and they found that when they included tens, which is the last one, the internal consistency was not that good, so they eliminated that when they try to make the analysis. So I think that's a good thing. You look into your methods and you look into your analysis, and you decide not to use it to make better results. Exercise. How often did you engage in light, medium, or heavy exercise? Never, once, twice, also ranked categorical type of answers. They did that. Now, they did not specify what was considered light exercise. So it could be different for you than it is for me. Also to start to think about the weaknesses of the study. Belongingness to university. During this semester, I have felt strong sense of belongingness to any university that you belong to. Strongly agree to strongly disagree. There was no official validation for this instrument. University appraisal. During the semester, I have experienced studying law of psychology at the university. Enjoyable, relaxing, or worthwhile, from not at all to extremely. And I have perceived my university experience as constituting a supportive environment or ultra competitive. There was no official validation for any of them. What were the results? Well, our sample size was 135, 59 from law, and 76 from psych. Now, were the groups equal? The answer straightforward is no, but I do have to think about my no. Why? From when we first started looking at the results, I mean, they're not the same, right? The sample size is not the same. The law students, they are from the first to the final year. The psych students, they're all first years, so there's differences there. The ages are not the same. 70% are female, the other 75% are female. But they got me to think about another thing. Are these differences statistically significant? The answer is we do not know, or at least I did not see any p-value in any of the tables. So we could not say if the groups are comparable or not, at least to my knowledge. Because I'm seeing some faces like, please stand me corrected, I'm okay with that. But up to here, I cannot say if they are the same or not, okay? What we can say, well, now moving for the results, emotional distress and physical distress, we did get the mean values. They go from a little bit to quite a bit in both of them. And in here, they did measure the difference with t-test. They did not specify which t-test they used, so I'm assuming it's a 2-sample t-test with their degrees of freedom. And for the one they did give us the p-value. So for emotional distress, we have a statistically significant p-value, but for physical distress, it's not statistically significant. What else did they do? Remember that all the objectives, they were looking for the possible associations. And for this one, they used the Spearman correlations. And I wrote here a cheat sheet. And since they used the rank test, that's why they used this test. And it might seem daunting, but it's super easy, right? So it could go from negative to positive, right? If it's positive, it means that they both go up. If it's negative, it means that one goes up and one goes down. So let's start right in the middle. What's the association between emotional distress and physical distress? Let's go to this number. It's 0.5. It goes here. So it's a moderate and it's positive. So more emotional distress, more physical distress in a moderate way. Easy, right? Oh, and the continuous lines means that they're all statistically significant. So we can see that they're all continuous lines. So all of them are statistically significant. From this one to this one, they're negative. So one goes up, one goes down. More belongingness, less emotional distress. The same goes for university, and they all go in the rank of weak. And this one is positive, more university competitive, more emotional distress. Okay. And for exercise, they're all statistically significant, all negative, and the last two wrong. And for light exercise, 35 weak. Okay, that's for law students. Now, when we go to psych students, dashed lines means they're not statistically significant. So now we can see that there are differences. This one, they have less statistically significant. This one goes in the same realm. So there is a positive association. Now, what they did not do, we can see the difference, right? But they did not compare them. So we don't have t-tests, we don't have anything to make a more objective comparison if these differences are statistical or not. What are the conclusions? So there is an association between exercise and mental well-being. Law students have higher emotional distress than psychology students. Exercise is negatively correlated with physical distress and indirectly correlated to emotional distress. What are the strengths of the study? And this is the one that I saw. They filled that gap in knowledge. The questionnaires were anonymous. They assessed the internal consistency of the scales used. They had the ethics committee's approval. The limitations, self-reported data, not validated instruments. There was a female preponderance, so over 70% in either of the samples. The type of exercise is unknown, so we don't know what's light, what's medium, what's heavy. The sample was by convenience, and they did not mention the control for any of the confounders. I think they didn't even mention accounting for them. They didn't a priori. So some questions and answers. I have to say that when I read the empirical comparative study, I had no idea what that was. I'm like, oh my God, my epic classes, I did not see that. What's this about? When I read through it, I said, okay, so what I got from it is what it was a cross-sectional study, and what they did, they compared it to some. It's like, hey, well, that's something I do understand. And also, when I read through it, it was confusing to me because I read that there was a health boot camp. So I thought, oh, they're going to do an intervention, and now they're going to see if the intervention worked or not. So that's why I got drawn to it. I said, hey, this is something that I might be able to use for some grant or something, but they did not do that. So I also think that it could be an opportunity for them to use. Now, how feasible would it be to add exercise as part of the curricula at universities? Do you think that it should be like a subject or something that should be included? Because now we know that if it helps lowering the stress and the anxiety of students, how about if we had like volleyball or boxing? Would you think that would be something, or would it violate the autonomy of a student? How would you guys feel? Yeah.
Even if it's something that you would do naturally on your own time, when you're forced to do something, you have an inclination not to want to do it anymore. And then also, you pay a lot of money to go to law school. So you were paying $500 to take a PE class as a lawyer. People might not.
You would be against it.
I personally love volleyball. Here's my.
I think there's a preoccupation with education being job training alone. But I'm a liberal arts kid who went to a liberal arts school, and they made us take PE credits while in undergrad. So that's a particular perspective.
Yeah.
Instead of making it required, because like he said, as soon as you require it, it just becomes another commitment you have to do. You could maybe, instead of like requiring it, kind of incentivize it, like say, hey, if you're a student here, you don't have to pay gym fees. Or like we'll waive intramural fee or something, so then more people are like, oh, maybe I try that, because it's not gonna be something else that's on my plate that I have to like worry about.
Anyone else has any thoughts? Okay. So what do you think would be some of the barriers that students have for exercise? And I'll give you an example. How many of us know that we have a gym here? Good. How many of us use it? Nice. I know. Okay. Now, some opportunities that I see in the article. I think that they could have used the healthy boot camp as an intervention. And it does mention that the author, she actually went to the boot camp for the 13 weeks that it was. So why not use it? If they had the questionnaire, the online questionnaire, they had the participants, why not like make the design different? It seems easy, but a lot of things goes on when you make a design, but why not, right? Now, specifying the type of exercise, I know that that was beyond the scope of the research, but it could have been nice to say, well, light exercise is yoga, and medium exercise is weightlifting. I don't know, something like that. It could have made a difference. Yes.
Just a comment on their measurement. It was a bit of a cop out to say, we didn't give any examples because there's no unified measure of exercise. I mean, a lot of exercise measures, and they have a surprising number of limitations and problems that, you know, the International Physical Activity Questionnaire, there's the talk test, which is a really easy one-sentence way to distinguish between light, medium, and heavy. So for an exercise study, their exercise measures were pretty limited. But well, I've got the mic. It was very interesting that the psychology students who were newer had weaker associations among things. So the law students had more exposure to the university culture and to coursework and to life as a student. And all the relationships most of them were stronger. That was interesting to me.
Yeah. And also the groups were not from the same university. So whenever they measure the belongingness, that could also be a bias because they do not have the same experiences there. Yes, Doctor.
The ages also were not the same. And when you don't have the anchors, what you call strenuous exercise, I can tell you changes as you get older.
Yes, exactly.
I'm surprised how physically active truckers think they are compared to what their actual activities level are. So when your fitness level is low, what feels heavy is very different.
Yes.
Yep.
That exercise is tying your shoes in the morning.
That's a lot for people who weigh 600 pounds.
It
Serious. Can't do it.
Yep.
Well, thank you very much. Any questions? Yes.
Well, I don't know if it's a question or a comment, but as we're on the topic of the sample demographics, I also think you mentioned it in your presentation that it was mostly female. But in law schools, typically they're more male-dominated fields. So I wonder how like stereotype threat or maybe not having as much access to community might have strengthened that relationship within law school potentially. And I don't know the makeup of that law schools like student population, but I just wonder if like how you think that would maybe have played a role if they had measured it.
Sorry, could you rephrase your question?
So law, like as a field, especially in higher education, is typically still male dominated. So since you had a majority female population, you maybe captured like the minority in that, or not you, they probably captured the minority in that student population in that law school. So maybe there's other things going on that might be contributing to emotional distress. And maybe I know that exercise also, if you find a community and you have people that are like you and also want to go exercise,
you're more likely to.
So I'm wondering if you think that how that might play a role, but I kind of just
I know. No, I think that also plays a role, and also the type of exercise you're prone to doing, perhaps lighter or heavier exercise, that might also change the statistics and the associations. Yes, I think that plays a role. Yes.
Fun fact, if you engage in moderate exercise, you're 9 times more likely to have a positive meeting experience than those who. So, anyway, I get my question is, how you operationalize exercise really matters. So how do you think they could have maybe operationalized this better? And this is for everybody, to be able to capture that in a more comparable way.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
The type of exercise, how many times a week,
Yeah.
And how long?
Yeah.
Like minutes or hours, and how frequent?
And why do you think, reflecting on that last week versus 6 months ago is?
Wait, and for how long have you been doing it for?
Yes.
Yes.
There you go. Okay. And so you kind of captured several different like markers that you would want in terms of physical activity to be able to then say, we've captured that for these individuals. And obviously they didn't do that in this particular case. So it's hard to feel confident in the findings when the measurement didn't actually capture the construct effectively. So.
So I know they're not making a causal argument here, but the way they kind of structure it up, they've got a path diagram.
Yeah.
And this is just kind of an open floor question. They presume that exercise only has a positive effect via its influence on physical issues, then into mental, then to
Indirectly, yes.
and is that always in this? Because that seems a little contrived.
It's not a standard way to do it, and also because they captured it, I think all at the same time, right? So draw a path model is kind of.
They're supposed to be measured sequentially.
There should be there should be time points and measurement differences and so forth like that. There are studies that show a direct connection between exercise and mental health. That you don't have to go through other factors, although other factors can be mediators, and there is a direct relationship. And that's been shown by randomized controlled trials.
It's like they gathered it all at the same time. Why wouldn't they do? There were some correlations they just conveniently chose not to do. So that's
present the ones that make their story work.
Yeah.
Chapman has a comment from online. He says it's also important to specify style of exercise. Other research indicates the impact on mood and attitude related variables. Sorry, there's a kind of blocking the comment. On cardio, this is more endorphin response than gym work. It would be good to focus on style.
Physical activity in lawyers, I think. Chapman. You can confirm that if you'd like, Chapman, but I'm pretty sure that was a variable in his thesis.
Anything else? All right, cool.
Thank you.
We'll be back this time next week. There's also a Flash Journal Club on Wednesday at 9:10. Those of you who are required to be there should know about it. But if anyone else wants to sit in and attend, you guys are all more than welcome to do so. If you are participating and you have not gotten me an article, please get that to me by the end of the day. I'd appreciate it. Thank you.